Hello again, everyone. This is Steve Kallas. Speaking of sports, I'm here with Westchester County Post contributor Johnnie Kallas, and we're here to touch briefly on the All-Star game, but also to give kind of a mid-season review, what's happened, who's where are they going, and we'll even give you a final selection from each conference before we're done. Johnny, I'll start off quickly with the All-Star game. You know my feelings on this. It's an exhibition game. They play it like an exhibition game. I know there was incredible three-point shooting, which again just makes my argument to move the three-point line back a lot even better, in my opinion. I think the general three-point line in basketball has changed the game, as I know you'll talk about. But, you know, Lillard, a couple from half court, Curry 4 for 4 from near half court. That was just incredible. I'll go back briefly to Curry having to make his last two shots in the three-point contest to win. And of course, he's Steph Curry, so he made the 1-point shot and then the money ball to win by one over Conley, who was not only making his first All-Star appearance, but almost won the three-point contest. So, look, I think it's an exhibition game. As you pointed out, the best player on Durant's team was Durant. He couldn't play. Then Embiid went and got a haircut. If you don't want to play in the All-Star game, maybe that's one way to get out of it, be near someone with COVID. I'm sure they didn't do it on purpose, but Simmons for LeBron's team and Embiid for Durant's team did not play in the game. But it really wasn't much of a game, quite frankly. But I'll turn it over to you because, again, I'm not here to talk about exhibition games.
Steve, good to be with you. And you're right. Yesterday's All-Star game was very much like an exhibition game. I do think in a really player-driven league, which the NBA is, it's cool to see these guys together. And I was hoping for a little bit like what we had the fourth quarter last year, which looking back was just before the pandemic and in the wake of Kobe's untimely passing, and they made that new 24-point rule. It made for a very exciting fourth quarter. I think LeBron's team came back, but there were some great matchups between LeBron and Giannis. This was more of a blowout, and it had that feeling the whole way through. I do just want to make a quick point. One thing the All-Star game yesterday gave me an appreciation for, outside of Giannis going a perfect, I think, 16 for 16 from the field, 2 bank threes, but still impressive, is just how much Steph Curry has changed the game and how good he is at what he does. Curry and Lillard, if anything you take away from that All-Star game, it's that Curry and Lillard are so far and above as shooters anybody else in the league, period. Both in terms of just, consistently making threes, but also in terms of, shooting the ball literally from half court. I hate the idea of a 4-point line. I think it's incredibly stupid. But if I'm Curry or Lillard, I take those shots more often. Nobody's going to be guarding you, and they're hitting them at 50+%. I mean, it's just unreal. I'm sure the part of that's the All-Star game, but I wasn't impressed by the competitiveness. It was nothing like the fourth quarter of last year. It was more like most All-Star games that we've seen. However, I do think Steph Curry and Dame Lillard really showed why, even amongst the best of the best, which is what we saw, they are head and shoulders as shooters above all of them.
Yeah. And I will point out, you're right, Giannis Antetokounmpo, 16 for 16, all-time All-Star record. You're right, 2 bank threes. I don't think he was calling either one of them, frankly.
Wasn't.
But 16 for 16 is 16 for 16. So, and he also did hit one from the corner legit. So I'll give him credit for that. He was 3 for 3 from 3. The other thing I'll say in general, I just don't think this year with the pandemic, you shouldn't have had guys from 30 teams flying into Atlanta.
Agreed.
Apparently they did a nice bubble thing for the players, and they were only there for they flew in Saturday night, they flew out Sunday night. But thousands of people came to Atlanta anyway, despite the fact that they couldn't do anything vis-a-vis the game. A lot of them got defrauded. The NBA sent out 200 cease and desist letters to people who were saying come to Atlanta for All-Star Weekend. Thousands of people came anyway. I think you'll hear about an outbreak coming out of Atlanta in the next few weeks. So at the end of the day, it's all about the money, as you know, and the league got $60 million, so it was great that they donated $3 million to historically black colleges and universities. That's great. But I still think it was all about the money on a bigger picture, and that's the only reason this All-Star game took place. I thought it was ill-advised, but we'll go past that. We'll set up the second season. Let's go Eastern Conference first. to me, I'll just speak briefly on it. To me, the Eastern Conference right now seems like a two-team race. The Nets are the Nets. They just signed Blake Griffin today. That's official now. He can't defend a fire hydrant right now. Not that he was ever good, but look, he's another big-time player who wants to win the championship. I think he'll help them to some degree, but he's really fallen off certainly the last year. And I guess it's good that they got him for the Nets, but again, they need guys who can defend. And one of the guys they talked about cutting is your guy, Iman Shumpert. I'd be shocked if they cut him because he still can defend a little. And you got to defend. And, the Nets have given up more. I wrote this down. The Nets have given up more points than any team in the league except for 3. 7-29 Minnesota, 14-20 Washington Wizards, 14-22 Sacramento Kings. I just think there's and the Nets are 24-13. I just think that might bite them. I think the Sixers have become contenders almost by default. Miami has not been good. Boston has not been good. Toronto has not been good. They're all around 500. Maybe you'll tell me, maybe they can make a run in the second half, and maybe they can. Right now, it's a two-team race. Nets, Philly. Nets are horrific defensively. Nets are incredible offensively. Right. And I don't know if it's going to be a Kansas City Chiefs-like shootout if it's the Nets and the Sixers in the Eastern Conference Finals, which right now, if I had to pick an Eastern Conference Final, it would be the Nets and the Sixers. What are your thoughts on the Nets generally, and anything else you want to talk about in the East?
Yeah, so I think I agree with a lot of what you said. I picked the Nets to go to the finals before the season. I'm going to stick with that pick. But obviously, I'm concerned if they're considering cutting one of the few players who can and actually wants to play defense on the team. The Blake Griffin signing is a flashy signing. I'm sure he'll score some points for them. But I think if you're adding guys, you need to either, trade or sign guys who can play defense. I mean, that's where the deficiency is. They can even afford offensively to, at least for a short period of time, lose one of their big 3, because having 2 of those guys, you're going to be one of the best offensive teams automatically. But they can't really lose anybody. They need to build on defense. I think the reason the Sixers are in it is partially because the East is weak, but it's also partially because Joel Embiid, as we'll talk about, is playing like an MVP candidate. I mean, for a big guy who's that dominant to shoot 41% from 3, if he keeps that up, then they can beat anybody because he's the best player in the world. I don't know if he can keep that up. We'll talk about that. But I'll stick with the Nets because not only – and usually I'm a guy who likes to trend towards the defensive side, which is I'm not picking them to win the finals, but I'll pick them in the East against really the only 2 teams who I think have a chance, so the Bucks and, as you said, probably the best chance, the Sixers. So I'll pick them against those 2 teams. But ultimately, not only can they score, they have some of the clutchest shot makers in basketball. You can make an argument that Durant and Kyrie are the 2 most clutch shot makers in basketball. Durant's been doing it forever. Kyrie obviously has one of the biggest three-pointers in the NBA history, maybe the biggest three-pointer in NBA history. And when your third guy in the mix is Harden, that's pretty good. So I'll stick with the Nets, but I totally share your concerns. And instead of, look, Blake Griffin's a fine signing, but instead of that, I would try and build up the defense in any way you can, even if it's getting somebody who gives you 16 to 18 minutes off the bench in key games down the stretch.
And the 3 you referenced, of course, was Kyrie as a Cavalier. He's the one who really won that game to bring that championship to Cleveland finally after all those years. The only other thing I want to say about the East, I do believe that right now Embiid is the MVP. In terms of the Sixers, their big 3 is playing better, more aggressive on offense is Ben Simmons, even though he's still not shooting from the outside, which I think could be the death knell for them. We talked about the TNT guys saying, "Oh, Ben, you got to start shooting them now so you can shoot them in the playoffs." And he's been in the league 4 years now. He hasn't even shown the ability to try even 14, 16 footers, never mind 3s. So I think that's going to hurt them. But Tobias Harris has been very good. They picked up a champion like Danny Green. Seth Curry can shoot the 3. I don't know if they're deep enough, but they have a very good starting 5. And again, if the Nets come back to the pack a little, they're not going to stop the Sixers. The question is, can they limit Simmons as he's been limited in the playoffs, in my opinion? But they might be, Kansas City Chiefs shootouts unless somehow the 76ers can hold the Nets to the basketball equivalent of 9 points.
No, not in basketball.
No, they can't. But tell me any other teams in the East you want to at least mention? Again, all the ones, including the Bucks, have not played well. Although you're right, they're certainly the other team that can get in. Although I think Antetokounmpo has the same problem in the playoffs that Simmons has, and we'll see if he can overcome that. If he can maybe call and make those bank threes, he's shooting threes okay this year. But I still think his game is totally go to the basket, often in transition. But yeah, I think that's the other team. You're right. Any other team you want to talk about? I know there's one in the East you want to talk about.
There is the surging 5 seed that I want to talk about, but first, really quick, I actually don't know who's the defense that's going to stop Giannis in that conference this year. That's actually interesting. Toronto did it, but they actually are good defensively. But that's a totally another question. And Simmons also, to me, is the best one-on-one defender in basketball. The problem is if you think of Seth Curry guarding Kyrie Irving in the playoffs, I mean, Seth Curry's a great shooter. Kyrie's going to average 40 if that's the plan. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen there. But obviously, we'll see what happens. Yes, the surging 5 seed, a team, from 34th Street in Manhattan is surprisingly, I can't believe it, Dad. Steve, excuse me, surprisingly, the 5 seed in the East, which says a lot about the team. Probably says more about the East. But just really quickly, got to give Thibodeau a ton of credit. I mean, it is really just awesome to see basketball be relevant in Manhattan again and New York City more broadly. Thibodeau and Julius Randle. I mean, Julius Randle was a very deserving All-Star selection. We talked about Embiid, who both of us, he's our midseason MVP. I think LeBron still has a chance as well. We can get to that a little bit later, maybe. But it's these big guys. Randle's not as big as Embiid, who can shoot from 3, who have really changed their game. Randle is shooting 40.8% from 3. He's a monster driving to the hoop. He's playing excellent on defense. He's leading the Knicks in all 3 major offensive categories, major categories, scoring, assists, and rebounds. And they have a really nice contribution by not their highly selected rookie, Toppin, who was in the slam dunk contest yesterday, but Emmanuel Quickley, who has really been an absolute, I don't think you can say rookie of the year candidate because of what LaMelo Ball is doing down in Charlotte, but has been, I think, one of the 5 best rookies in the NBA and a really excellent surprise for the Knicks. So I really like what the Knicks are doing. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I should say they're, the 5 seed now, they're 2 games ahead of the 10 seed. So, and that tells you a lot about the East-West. But what I really like about what the Knicks are doing is Thibodeau has him as one of the best defensive teams in basketball, but he's also laying that foundation. And Randle, I think, will be there at least next year, hopefully longer than that. He deserves it. But he's laying that foundation to attract a real superstar. And you put a real scorer superstar in this team in the East, they can be competitive. I'm not saying with one superstar they're going to win a championship, but they can be really competitive. And we've all heard those Devin Booker rumors. I'm not sure why he'd leave the Suns, who I think you're going to touch on in a few minutes. But if that's true, obviously not this year, but a couple years down the line, he is the kind of scorer that this team needs. They're a young team. They're only getting better. Really happy to just see competitive basketball in New York. But I do just want to point out, the Warriors are the 9 seed right now in the West. They'd be the 5 seed in the East. The East-West divide, which has really existed for 30 years outside of a couple of teams, frankly, the Bulls in the 90s, the Heat for a few years in the early 2010s with LeBron. It's just so imbalanced. It's really mind-blowing when you take a step back and look at it. I think the East have 3 teams that are more than 2 games above 500. In the West, it's something like 6 or 7 teams. So I'm going to like whoever comes out of the West. But that East-West divide is something that we often talk about. I don't know if there's anything they can do about it, but it's a big concern. It's gone on for 30 years. Like I said, I don't know if anything can be done about it, but something probably should.
Well, I think you're right about the Knicks, and if they're the surprise team in the East, and they are the 5 seed, and they're only a half game out of 4th, home court advantage for the Knicks. Is that possible?
Yeah, there we
You're right.
go. Away from Boston.
We're also 2 games out of 10th, and teams like Miami is right behind them, and the Raptors are right behind them, and we'll have to see what happens. But I'm gonna go on almost an even bigger surprise, where the NBA Coach of the Year in the West, Thibodeau is the East representative. I've got Monty Williams of the Phoenix Suns in the West, and it's not just Devin Booker or Chris Paul, although I'll talk about them briefly. Booker 25 and 25 a game, 5 assists, unbelievable. It's interesting though. He's shooting 36% from three-point land, and Phoenix is an excellent three-point shooting team. Chris Paul shooting 48.6% from the field, averaging 16 and 9 assists, 4th in the NBA. And to me, he's making Booker a superstar. Booker's been a star. He's lost in Phoenix. Maybe that's why he wants out. We've read those articles. Imagine Booker in New York as you're imagining Booker in New York. And the other thing about Chris Paul, he's 2nd in the NBA in free throws shooting. But what I wanted to talk about is a couple of other guys. They got Deandre Ayton, who's a really good big man. He's averaging 14.5 points, 11.4 rebounds a game, 7th in the NBA. His Achilles heel is he's shooting just under 60% from the free throw line. So you might see a hack of Ayton at the end of the year, because most of these guys, other than him, are really good free throw shooters. This Mikael Bridges, who's a Villanova guy from Philly. Philly drafted him and then traded him, broke his mother's heart. His mother, I think, worked for the 76ers. It was just like 2 years ago. But now he's 13.7 points a game. He's shooting 52% from the field and 42% from 3. So whenever you go down the list with these guys, Jay Crowder, a guy you like a lot, averaging 10 points, 5 rebounds, 38% from 3. And then they even got guys coming off the bench, Cameron Johnson and Dario Saric, the guy who used to be on the 76ers as well. He had COVID. He was hurt for a while, but now he's back. These guys are both shooting over 40% from 3. They only make like 1 or so a game. But my point is they're so deep. They have 10 guys who play 15 minutes or more a game. They have 13 guys, Johnny, who play 10 minutes or more a game. That says to me, come the end of the season, the dog days of whatever, and here come the playoffs, I don't think they're such a fluke. And the other thing I'll say about Phoenix is their next 20 games, I looked at the schedule for Phoenix the next 20 games, and to me they look like easy 14-6. And you can talk about the Lakers and the Clippers, or I can talk about the Clippers a little. I'm going to stop with Phoenix in the middle. And by the way, the guys with the threes, I'm sorry, are Cameron Payne and Frank Kaminsky. Those guys, they hardly play, but they're both shooting over 40%. So it doesn't matter how deep you go on this team. For free throw shooting and three-point shooting, they're all good, except Ayton, who is obviously a really good big man. So I think they have a big shot. Defensively, they're 4th in the league in giving up points. And I'll just give you quickly, because this will help your argument. The Knicks give up the least amount of points. That's Tom Thibodeau and the players buying in, led by Julius Randle. The Knicks, 104 points a game. The Lakers are 2nd. That's going to be your big pitch for them, 106. Phoenix is 3rd, 107. And after you talk a little about the West, I'm going to do Utah. They're 4th at 108. And my Clippers are 6th, so maybe you can take the Lakers, and then I'll do a little on the Clippers. But I'm going to take a deep dive on Utah. So if you want to do both LA teams, I'm okay with that.
I'll let you do the Clippers, but I still like the Lakers. It is all dependent on AD's health and also LeBron's health, though he's been healthy, except for that one extended incident a couple of years back. But if LeBron and AD are healthy, I still think they're the best duo in the league. I think they won under the most difficult of circumstances in the NBA bubble last year, which I think only helps. And I'm just going to pick with LeBron. I think it's the year of, or a couple of years, the last, if you include last season and this season, of just pick with the guys who have done it. LeBron in basketball, Brady in football. These guys just went. They're always in championship games. It's still a difficult season with the COVID protocols. I know it's not quite as new or maybe as difficult, though I don't know, as it was in the bubble last summer. But I'm just going to stick with LeBron. I'm going to stick with the best player in the world. I think Embiid's the MVP right now, but LeBron deserves a fifth MVP. He's been second like 7 times. He has 4 right now. I'm not saying you should just give it to him because he deserves a fifth MVP, but what he's doing at his age, the number of years he's been in the league, will never be matched again, especially in a sport like basketball. So I'm going to stick with the Lakers. Schroeder's come along as a good number 3. They play excellent defense, as you alluded to. They can at times, just like they did last year in the bubble in that first round, have a hard time scoring the basketball, frankly. But I think they'll find a way. And, I know it's not necessarily a deep analytical framework I'm utilizing here, but at the end of the day, in a player-driven sport like basketball, I'm going to go with the best player. And not that he can do it on his own. If AD's there with him, 2 of the top 5 players in the world, I still think they're going to be in the finals, and I think they're going to win it.
Yeah, I think you're right. LeBron should have been the MVP last year. I mean, Giannis got it, and he had a great year. I just think LeBron, led them to the championship. As you know, the MVP is only for the regular season. Sometimes I think that's dumb, but it is what it is. Here are my 2 problems with the Lakers. Lakers three-point shooting, 24th in the league. Lakers free throw shooting, 25th in the league. That's a problem. I'll speak briefly on my Clippers because I want to do a deeper dive on Utah and give them some credit. Clippers three-point shooting, first in the NBA, 41.9%. Clippers free throw shooting, first in the NBA, 84.4% as a team. That's incredible. Clippers on defense, as I said, 6th in the league. But you are correct with the LeBron AD because I say to you, unless Paul George, he's not LeBron, he's not AD, but unless Paul George can really lift his game, he's not Kawhi, but he has to play. He made like 3 threes yesterday that were like incredible. Guys draped on him. I understand it's an exhibition game, but he has to be Paul George, and he wasn't last year. He had occasional good games in the playoffs. On balance, he was terrible, and I think he essentially admitted it. But, Beverly's shooting threes really well. They got Batum, who I think is a good pickup. I hope they don't trade Lou Williams because if they want to make a run, this is the year. There's been rumors that they're going to trade Lou Williams, but he's still unbelievable to me. So I think everybody knows, about the Clippers and Kawhi. Doc Rivers, there's only one guy who's lost 3-1 leads more than once in the playoffs in the history of the NBA. And Doc, who I think is an excellent coach, he's lost 3 3-1 leads. So I don't know if everyone would get nervous if he was up 3-1. But I think you'd see a few articles if and when that happens. But I want to give a lot of credit to Quinn Snyder, coach of Utah. Again, I would vote for Monty Williams in the West, Thibodeau in the East. I think they only give out 1, so we'll see where they finish up. But I'll say it again, Phoenix and Utah, I looked at Utah's next 20 games. They're not going to come back, in my opinion, to the Lakers and the Clippers. The Lakers and the Clippers are going to have to go like 17-3. I did not look at their schedules. But at least in the next 15 to 20 games, those 2 teams, Phoenix and Utah, who you did not think would be ahead of LeBron and Kawhi. Again, AD's been hurt for a long time now. I don't think they're going to catch him in the next 15 or 20 games. I think, if anything, the league's going to be wide. And I know you're going to tell me the playoffs, it doesn't matter. But Utah isn't just Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. Mitchell, of course, is a star. Surprisingly to me, he's only shooting 42% from the field, but he's shooting 38 from 3. And there are a lot better three-point shooters on the team than that 38%. And Donovan Mitchell, I'll just run them off quickly. Your guy, Bogdanovich, 40.5 from 3, averaging 16 and 4 rebounds a game. Mike Conley, another one of your guys, 42.2 from 3, 16 points, 6 assists a game. Joe Ingles, 46.5% from 3, 11.5, 4 assists, 3 rebounds a game. And especially your boy, Jordan Clarkson. Not only is he leading the league in free throws, 96.7% from the free throw line, he's scoring 18 points a game in 26 minutes, Johnny. This guy might be 6th man of the year candidate this year. 4 rebounds, and he's shooting 37% from three. So the guy I left out because he doesn't shoot well, and he's another Hacker Rudy Gobert candidate. But he's playing great. 14.5 points a game, 13 rebounds. He's one of the top rebounders in the NBA. I know they were joking on TNT and some of the players about how Utah gets no respect. Seems to me they got a ton of respect when it was Karl Malone and John Stockton. And this team is very good. And I think having guys like Ingles and Clarkson coming off the bench is really going to help them. So I'll say it again. Do I think they're better than the Lakers and the Clippers? I don't. Do I think Phoenix is better? I don't. But their schedules the next 20 games are pretty weak, and it's all about health for the Clippers and the Lakers. I don't even think they care if they're number 1 or 2. I mean, they're going to play for it, but if they're healthy, that's almost more important than where they're seated. So I'll go against you again, although I was wrong last year. I'm going Clippers in the West. I am going Nets in the East still because it's just, to me, too much to overcome. The trade deadline is, I think, March 25th, so they might have a few weeks to make a few moves, and I don't mean Blake Griffin moves. Again, people are going nuts that that's an incredible – if you told me he was a great defender, that would be more incredible to me from a pickup perspective. Oh, and the one guy in Utah I forgot to mention because everybody forgets him is this Royce O'Neill, who has actually made his way from an undrafted player to a starting player for Utah. Why? Because he can defend. No other reason. He's scoring 8 points a game, 7 rebounds a game, but he's also shooting 41% from three. Obviously, he doesn't take a lot, but he's their main defense guy, and the league needs more of those guys. They don't exist anymore. You can give me 15 or 20 excellent three-point shooters. I don't think you can give me 15 or 20 great defenders. They don't exist. But I think the Nets have to kind of find one, maybe two, because, again, their fourth guy isn't really good defensively, the three-point shooter who's unbelievable. There's rumors they're going to trade Spencer Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie's a very good player, but if they can get a defender for him, a really good defender, they don't need more offense. They just don't. So I've got Clippers, Nets, Clippers to win it all. I've got right now Embiid for the MVP. I wouldn't be upset if LeBron got it. They're not playing great without AD, as you know. Mm-hmm. And their record against teams over 500 is not that good. And they're not a great shooting team, so there's things you can argue against them. That's what I'm arguing. I know you go with Brady, you go with LeBron. Even you're running out of years with Brady and LeBron, but Brady won this year. LeBron won last year. He might win this year again. And Coach of the Year, I'll wait till the end, but it's either Monty Williams or Thibodeau. That's pretty much all my picks. How about you?
Yeah, I think as you pointed out, if I'm the Lakers, I don't care where I finish as a seed. I think LeBron has effectively said this in the past too. I just need to make sure AD is 100% come playoff time. That's my only consideration. I think they rushed him back last time, and then he re-injured this injury that he has. I think it's a calf or something, and you can't mess around with that. Keep him out longer than he should be out, and try and get him ready, a few games before the playoffs. I think that's what they should do. It doesn't matter where they are as a seed. You're totally right about Jordan Clarkson. He's just a scorer, man. He's just a scorer. He can be frustrating to watch at times, but the way he's able to score the basketball, frankly, at his height is pretty incredible. And I didn't know that about the foul shooting. That's equally incredible. It's hard for me to imagine, though they'll have all the motivation in the world to do it. LeBron losing to Utah in the playoffs, but anything's possible. But after what he said during the All-Star game pick selections, Utah should be motivated to do that. But that's just a lot of experience, not just with LeBron, but that's now a championship team, a lot of championship players. And I do think if they're knocked off, it's going to be from the Clippers, not anybody else. But I'm going to stick with the Lakers to win it all. And, it should be exciting. It's nice that you don't have sort of I guess you could argue LeBron's been to the finals 10 of the last 11 years, but it doesn't seem as inevitable as, for example, the Warriors were, the Heat were before them. It's nice that there's a little bit more parity in the league. Hopefully, we'll have that for at least a couple of years until the Knicks super team in 2025, of course.
Good job, Johnny. This is Steve Kallas speaking of sports, along with Johnnie Kallas. We'll see you the next time.